is 7 o'clock. We can go ahead and get started. Let's see. All right, please come on in.
Oh, yes.
We're going to get
We thought it was
started.
ready.
Yep, come on in. Come on in. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for all coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. So this is our budget workshop for the fiscal year 23 to 24. This is only a workshop. There won't be any action taken in this meeting. However, we will go through the budget and go through each line item, discuss amongst the board, and work together to have our final product, which would then be heard on September 28th, which is the public hearing. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have several different pieces of information here. Val ran with you during the presentation. You see, I would like to get us started by going through the budget. The budget is available online. The budget is also posted in the window. If you want to grab a picture of that on your phone, if you want to follow along. I also have an extra here. I'm sure we can make some more copies if necessary. Okay. You'll take copies. Anybody else want a copy? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Give it a second. Let's make more copies. And then that way they can look along. So a little bit different from this being a workshop than a regular meeting. We don't have the citizens be heard portion. However, as the presiding officer, I will still work to maintain order. This is a little bit more informal than it is formal compared to a regular meeting. However, the need to maintain order is still present in this proceeding. There would be an opportunity at the end of each section. So we're going to talk about several funds and kind of break down the budget based on the different funds. If time allows, at the end of the conclusion of each fund's discussion, I would open it up if anybody wanted to provide input. I simply ask that you could raise your hand, and then I'll call on you when we get to that time. But for now, we'll give it a couple moments to get a few copies to distribute.
Okay, 2 or 2. Have you or 1? Either one.
We'll do that. I would like to see this thing get together Thursday. Yeah, but that's mainly for, unless you see the need and when that comes up, I'll leave it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So, how I envision this meeting going, we would go through the proposed budget. I know City Administrator Valerie and Matt has put together some information for us. I'd like to go through the proposed budget, and then if there's items that need to be inputted based on each of the funds and the materials we have, please feel free to do that as we hit each of the items. So starting with the budget, you'll see there's some administrative pages where it talks about proposed tax rate. Notice all of these are 0 for proposed tax rate. Overall, the purpose of the budget is to be conservative and realistic, in line with the city's nature of the city's operations, and we can't operate in a deficit. So we want to have revenues that are going to balance against our expenses. The budget's going to consist of a few different funds. One's the general fund. The general fund is our primary, I kind of call it our operating fund, where we're going to have revenues from sales tax. We're going to have our permits. We're going to have fines and fees that would all be going into funding those revenues. And then we're also going to have expenses where it's going to talk about salaries or court costs or police department, and kind of the meat and bones of our day-to-day operations. We'll get to the specifics here in a moment. We also have the capital improvement fund. The capital improvement is for what you guessed, capital improvements. We have a few unique circumstances this year through opportunities provided by the Bear County Commissioners Court. Big thank you to Commissioner Rebecca Clay Flores for helping us achieve 2 big grants that will help for capital improvements. One of those grants being a $50,000 grant for the park improvements, as well as a $3 million grant for the sewer project, the engineering costs to get the project shovel ready. So also included with our capital improvement fund, I know in the past they've taken prior balances, so at the end of the year we're going to have a balance that we can then transfer to the capital improvement fund, increasing that balance, but also allowing us to invest more into the city. What has been also included in the capital maintenance fund in the past has been our debt obligations. We had a recent presentation that showed the different tax notes that we have. They've also been paying for the leased vehicles out of the capital improvement fund. These are 2 audit items I would consider operational items. For this current year, they're included in the capital improvement fund. However, normal day-to-day business, really in future.
The building is capital.
The building is, yes. I'm talking the debt obligations, or any new debt obligations if you need any kind of short-term financing for projects, as well as the leases on the vehicles. Those I would consider to be a capital improvement. Moving on to our street maintenance fund. So we do have a street maintenance fund. The bulk of what is funding that street maintenance fund is about 0.25% of our sales tax. So we have 1 3/4, so 1.75% goes to our general fund, and then 1/4 of a point goes to our street maintenance fund. In the last year, there wasn't any funds used, which creates an opportunity to potentially have twice as much for street improvements than we had previously. We also have the PSA fund, the Professional Service Agreement Fund. This was a fund created when developers came into the picture. They wanted us to invest our resources in engineering and costs related to the project. So we set up that special fund just for that project. There has been expenses coming and going related to that project. Ultimately, it does need to be reconciled. we'll get here in a minute. I'm doing a little bit of an overview before we get to the details, so that's great that we have. We also have the police department asset forfeitures funds that we accumulate through the process of forfeited funds through the operations of the police department. We also have a police department training fund. So getting to our balances as we are now. So at the time of this budget being filed, those are the bank balances that are listed on the far left-hand column. Should be, I think it's in the budget. It's going to be below that blue. Yeah, lots of letters. So we have our starting balances, and we have our projected revenues, which we're going to go through in detail. We also have our projected expenses, which we'll also go into detail. Notice that the balances, so these starting balances of the general fund, the intent of the general fund is we're budgeting our revenues and we're budgeting our expenses and they'll match. So the beginning balance would not be included with our revenues and expenses budgeted for this next fiscal year. So therefore, those balances would then be carried over or transferred to the capital improvement fund. With the intent of, we're going to establish our financing mechanism for the sewer grant. For this case scenario, we'll be able to have those reserve funds that we can put in some short-term treasuries or some kind of short-term investment generating a yield. Again, in order to do that, we also need our investment policy, which I have something I was working on that we can discuss at another meeting. But ideally, with interest rates where they are now, cash just sitting there, I've seen on our statements, so we don't get bank fees because there's a return, so our fees get netted. And it's a lot more, we're not getting the value of what current interest rates could be, and we're just getting our fees reduced by some of the returns. So unless there's any questions on this page with our beginning balances, we can go ahead and jump into the general fund revenues. Or is there anything you'd like to add to your different funds? So for the general fund revenue sources, first item, so we have three columns here. One is the 2023 to 2024. This is the proposed budget revenue sources. Then we have our amended budget, which is what we should be following from October 2022 through. Right. Okay. So it was amended in January, but for the fiscal year, that would cover from October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023. That's the amended 22 to 23 numbers. And then those actual numbers are through August, so it's not a full year. I believe there's some materials here that we've been able to get a bit more recently that might be a little bit more of an accurate description. So going through each of these, we have our ad valorem tax, 0. We have building permits and business permits. One item we discussed recently is looking at our fee schedule, so we can update this.
We're losing money on permits.
We should
In
be.
general, we're losing a lot of money on permits. We're not covering it. Okay, here.
You're saying we're losing money on our professional fees, and that's something we'll get into detail. Please don't. All right, so our building permits, really all of our permit fees, that's something we need to look up on a fee schedule. And that's something I noticed in our expenses, which we'll get to. They're not profit centers. They should be basically a wash. Maybe we should at least cover our costs and maybe then some, but it shouldn't be it's not a profit center. And I'm going to be keeping a tally, so as we go through these, and you'll point out items that we need to change. So those are the amendments we'd be proposing at the meeting on the So I'm gonna try and keep a running tally as we identify those things that y'all wouldn't see different. Please, let's point them out, and I'd like to keep a good record to have an updated version for the community. Next item is the contract towing. So we actually haven't made any money on the contract towing in the past. However, we recently signed our new agreement with Charcoal Towing, where the city's going to be getting a 25% portion of the fees that they're charging for vehicles that are getting towed, whether they're accidents or general towing needs. If it's occurring within the city, well, the city's going to get a 25% hit. This number is yet to be kind of tested and determined, but it's something we can look at on an ongoing basis in the future. Okay. The contract that was presented to you, that was July 20th?
No, before that.
July
It's probably
20th.
May. It's probably end of May. We did contact our last tool company and asked them to send us what they owe us. So they're supposed to be doing it from Richard's time? Richard's
Fines and fees, so these are our court costs or court revenues from either writing tickets or court municipal revenues. There is, so in the past, they have budgeted for more revenues.
We did actually, like, as far as execution goes, we hit 409,000. But we didn't have court for several months, they were without a judge, so that's why we were there behind.
There's also a limitation, so we can't budget more than 30% of our annual revenue from that line item of revenues. So that's what's, I backed into that 30% figure, so we can't budget more than that. So I took this 1 million, basically 1,057,000, just under 30% of that. Franchise fees, CPS, it's $50,000 in line with prior years. Our franchise fees for Tiger, so our actual was $6,000, the budget was only $3,000. Really look forward to that contract coming up again, which I think is in 2024, 25. And really look forward to looking at that contract, so I'd like to get us a better deal. Fireworks permits, $1,000, in line with prior year's budgets. Food permits, $2,000, in line with prior year's budgets. General sales tax. So prior years, there was $530,000 budgeted. I'm at $420,000. I came up with that number by taking an average of our sales tax revenues from October 2022 through 10 months. So that would take it through July of 2022. That on an average basis, at only 1 3/4%, I came up with this as a projected amount for a 12-month period. I do have a more recent version. I want to share. So this is printed as of today. So if you'll see, what was missing in my averages was August and September. August was a good month. September, not as much. So I feel like this $420,000, so that's not the total amount of sales tax. The total amount would be the $420,000, which is the 1.75, and then the street improvement fund gets 0.25%. So the total sales tax revenue would be this general sales tax plus our street improvement sales tax revenues. Go on to alcohol sales tax of $600, slightly less than the amended, more in line with actual. Our inspections of $2,500 in line with the amended prior budget, although we currently haven't made this is in line with the
It's more of a pass-through.
It shouldn't be revenue. I mean, it shouldn't be a profit center. And I think that's something that needs to be adjusted in the expenses to reflect that. So I'm going to make a note. Or inspections. All right, refund / other revenue. So I believe the $55,000 that was previously budgeted was a grant, and our actual is $3. So there was a period where the school crossing, I think there was some confusion on my side with the school crossing versus the other revenue. So is there any reason that this should be 0 versus 2,000?
The other?
Yeah, other refund /
I
other.
believe that was not a grant, I believe that was an insurance premium.
Okay.
So that's not something that's gonna get.
Either way, I don't think this should be 2,000 anymore. I'm gonna make it that for you. School crossings, $1,000 in line with actual. For sign permits of $1,000 in line with the prior year's budget. However, our actual is only 110. It's probably an item we want to revise as well. So our technology and building, the budget originally had $20,000. This version is $8,000. I don't know why the actual.
So that would be report. This is only part, this is building technology.
Okay, so that's
Normally it would be there 20.
normally be what?
20.
Would it be a percentage of the revenues or the fines and fees?
No, it's an additional fee that's tacked on to every citation. There's statute.
Right. Yard sales permits, $200. They did only budgeted 50. Something we should look at in our fee schedule and actually enforce. Records request, $200. Again, we should look at there's a lot of time and money that goes with those records requests. We should increase our fee. All right, the next item is warrants and civil collections. Those two kind of go hand in hand. So currently we have from my understanding, there's a significant backlog of warrants that haven't been collected over the years, and they've really stacked up. This is an opportunity I see for our city to be able to add a big number to our revenues for this year. So I've used a number of 155,000 in addition to the standard operating cycle of $31,000. So in prior years, that 35,000 seemed realistic. Although we have 0 revenues to account for, I think this is achievable. I would also further recommend re-looking at our warrant collection process and utilizing a firm like Lindberger, who gets paid from the collection of the fee, instead of a court clerk or a position just for that, when we can use a law firm that gets paid on success.
I'm assuming you use the officer for that?
Right, so I think it'd be a two-hand system, so the officers who get paid on successful completion of a warrant, no problem, but Lindberger also is the one being the squeakiest wheel, to try and push through some of the lower hanging fruit and let the officer work on the higher hanging fruit, the ones that we can't get readily available through standard process of mailing, calling, and Lindberger's typical process.
Are we looking at having someone in the future that will be the one processing the warrants from the court, or like a favorable view on that, or who's going to be having that?
So that'd still be part of the standard process. Okay, any items to talk on revenue? questions, concerns? Okay. So I have the amendments that we discussed. So I have the amendments that we discussed. We have our inspections, which should be a wash. The refund and other revenue of 2,000 should be zero. The technology and build up to $20,000. That's it. Is there somebody like to be recognized to say something on the topic of revenues? Yes.
I just wanted to agree that hiring a law firm to collect on fines is what almost what every city does. They're the ones at no cost to the city, they know the letters. They're the ones that pitch you an omnibus, the Omni system, which is way cheaper than warrant. Basically, puts a hold on your driver's license. And so I see people coming to office all the time where they ignore tickets. They wait 4 or 5 years, but once time to renew that license, we got it, never, they go get it. So, last I recall, we got about $1 million in back fines. Officers leave and eventually those go stale and it's missing. The other thing I would suggest is starting to hold jury trials. Be very blunt. Anyone who comes to my office and says, I got a ticket from Ormy, he said, they set up for a jury trial, we never had it. And so they ultimately all get dismissed. So it's great if you're the guy with the ticket, you know that that's the case, but having that at least once a year, but at least prevent people from doing that deed and trying to get out.
Are you simply saying that in an open meeting, that's cause enough?
I'm just suggesting, I know when we first, like everything else, when we first start, we do the best we can, and now we've matured. And I think to operate like other cities, we need to have jury trials once or twice a year and have a collection firm, and I think we're going to see a much bigger return. It'll be a short term, maybe the next 2 or 3 years with the backlog of tickets, but that's a great way to increase revenue that's already there. It doesn't cost the residents anything. And like I said, these law firms, the way it works is they add their fee onto the person paying the ticket. So it doesn't, the city still collects 100% of the fund. It's what I see the best source of revenue we can get right now. It's kind of a no-brainer that we're not looking at, but we don't really have.
When you said the law firms, typically, are you talking about Limburger, or you're talking
Yeah.
about our law firm?
No, the American Light Barber, but there's more than that. Light Barber probably does 60% of the cities in our region, but there's other, anything like that. That's what they're set up for. I mean, they do a data input, the letters go out, they've got, it's like a machine, it works pretty effectively. The other issue we had in the past, I know we had issues with connectivity. So I know a lot of our core operations were slowed down, we did everything manually, mainly because we didn't have high-speed internet. But my understanding is now that we do, we're able to look at an automated system with tickets go right into the system. And so in most municipal courts, everything is just done on a laptop to laptop, whether you talk to the prosecutor, or go before the judge, or the clerk, instead of having to have paper manual files, and online payments and all that kind of stuff.
And that's their capability, I don't know if we've had a conversation.
But I think so folks in a court operation that need to, I guess it's not me.
Yeah.
We're finding a court operation that need to bring in a lot more revenue over the next 2 or 3 years, and to dig through that backlog of cases.
Thank you.
And I think we're
I have a question for Attorney Art. I have a question. The last meeting you made us, I don't know if I understood what you were saying or not. You said there was $1 million in reserve.
My understanding is about $1 million in unpaid tickets or fines that have been issued by our warrant.
Wow. Okay,
So-
I got you now. Okay.
Was that over 2,500 files?
That's a lot of bucks.
They're asking about Linebarger or their main competitor, and their name escapes me. We just went through a contract process in Kyle. They will, at least in Kyle, they agree to bring in the clerk staff to input all the paper files into their electronic system. So the city meeting is paper, so they were there for like several weeks doing all the data entry. And so that could be something you can negotiate if you bid it out, is kind of getting everything onto a kind of modern or electronic system. I know that's also, there's also integration issues, so it's really goes.
Yeah, we have that.
Okay, yeah, that's all I can be.
Okay, thank you.
We had that before, didn't we?
We've had parts of it,
That's why we did
the issue with the servers kept going down because we didn't have high-speed internet.
it.
That was a limitation.
All right, any other comments? Board on the revenues. All right. All right, now going into our expenses. So again, this is the general account, the general fund. We're going to go through all of our expenses. It's broken into three categories, three main categories. One, we have our administration. Two, we have our municipal court. And then three, we have the police department. Same order where we have the 23 to 24 proposed budget amount, the amended 22 to 23 budget from the prior year, and then our actuals. And again, these actuals are through end of August. Okay, auditor, $25,000 is an annual requirement that we need to do.
For the city, because we are paying catch up and we need to get finance for the population, we're gonna need,
So
according to our auditor and our financial advisor, we're going to need 20, 21, and 23.
yes, so the administrative expenses are these annual expenses. So I would call that an outside of an annual item expense. So I have a line item in the capital improvement fund for getting caught up. So this should allow for 2 years as we're planning our general fund as well as the capital improvement fund. Since the our beginning balances from this general fund would be transferred to our capital improvement fund. I don't want to put prior year's expenses in our current year's budget, so that we're not running at a deficit when we have the extra to put into the capital improvement fund and pay it out of there. That's why this is $25,000. Our bank fees, I've reduced those from prior years, and I did that because the way our bank fees are charged, they're netted against a short-term investment rate. So now that rates are a lot higher, our fees have been very marginal, very minimal. And I don't think interest rates are going down anytime soon, so I've reduced that fee amount. The Bear County tax, or the Bear County levy, I think that is just for having our 0% tax rate registered. A bookkeeper of $5,000 is something we've talked about in prior meetings. You know, the intent of, or the job description of the city clerk is to be doing our ongoing bookkeeping services. However, this allows for on a quarterly basis to have a third party come in, review the books, review the accounts, and make sure we're in our best shape financially for our audits and our ongoing review of our budgets. City engineer, $25,000 in line with the prior year's $25,000. We have a lot that we discussed and trying to look at in the realm of engineering and planning. I do have line items included in further places for one-time improvements. Right now it's $25,000, which is not too far off from what we actually spent last year and what we had previously budgeted. Our city events, $5,000. Previously it was $3,000. That's a conversation I know we've had multiple times where we want to participate in these types of events and sponsor more of them throughout the year. So I think we can, it's money well spent. I would like to do more, but I think $5,000 should be sufficient. City contract labor, I have $1,000. Prior years,
That's our cleaning service, the $19,000, that's our cleaning.
city contract labor,
That's the cleaning.
cleaning. So in here it's $1,000. The actual is $19,000. The budgeted amount is $10,000. So cleaning, being the difference. So I know the city's utilized contract labor in different capacities in the past. Really, we shouldn't need to, or do it as little as possible. And really, if it's a regular cleaning lady, then this should be included with our salaries, wages. Is she paid on
Contractor, she's 299.
still? Okay. I don't know, we gotta figure something out.
No, I'm all for staff meeting,
I'll feel labor in front.
All right,
I'm all for
all right,
staff meeting.
all right, good, then we're gonna need some help.
Mind me the back of the finger.
Got supplies, fun, all right. All right, commissioner's expense, prior year's 2,000, wanted to see what y'all thought about bringing that to 1,000. I also did the same for the mayor's expense. I know in the past they've had certain amounts allocated for the board for things like business cards and name placards, and I'm not sure what else we would need. But I don't think I need more than $500 for those items. So I reduced in this budget $500 for each of y'all. If you have any disagreements with that, you know. So far, I don't think we've spent anything.
We have a thing. We'll go for what's promised that. We have nothing.
Okay, we'll leave it as is. Communications is $3,468. So that's for our notes. Yeah. So the text my gov service that we had previously approved, something that I'd like the city to utilize more. If you just go to our website, you can sign up for the text service. You can subscribe for items. You can report complaints. You can communicate with the city. We can also be pushing the information as well. It's a service that we really like to utilize, but we really haven't had much participation in that. So I think that's emergency management. You'll notice prior years we had $2,000. I reduced it to 0 and actually moved it to a police department line item. Because to me it seems like something, I know we have our emergency management preparedness on our side, but really to me that seems like a police department item for emergency management. Moving on to fuel, we actually spent $16,000. Our prior year was $25,000. And what is that all? Is that?
That's the city.
So that's
Public
police
Works,
department,
police.
public works. So you said 1,800 a month.
Yeah, that's average.
My experiences with on my private side is fuel is something that we have to manage very tightly. I'm curious, what are we doing to manage our fuel? Public works, police department, or vehicles, or PM? How are we projecting this out? Or tracking it, I guess.
I mean, for the police side, I would say it's maintaining the vehicle in top shape, that way they're not burning gas, but there's really no way around it.
We can do it. Mileage law.
Well, I know the police department, they'll idle their vehicles.
When they're on patrol or if they're running radar, the vehicles have to be on.
What I'd like to do, with this being listed under administrative, if the bulk of these are police department, I'd like to break that out into a police line item. So we have our public works fuel, and we have our police department fuel. Can you two get us that information prior to the hearing on the 28th, so we can update this? Does that make sense?
You want an estimate?
Yes. health inspections, $2,000. That should be a wash.
It should get fascinating.
And our inspections, so this is one thing that needs to be, yeah. Our insurance is 25,000 in line with our actual and.
That's pretty good.
How so?
2 months have to go. They haven't seen the quotes yet. But they did say it's gonna go.
Are we getting close to 28?
We won't get them until after October.
Let's see if we can get an idea. Otherwise, you know, this is a living, breathing document. We need to follow this throughout the year. If there's something that comes up, such as our insurance, we can always amend it. I know it's not ideal from an auditor's perspective, but I think this next fiscal year it'd be very important for us to maintain our budget on a regular.
Let's go back to inspection.
Okay.
That property over there, the 90, that is to be set, is September.
Oh,
Is it included?
well, hold on though, that's, we can talk about later, it's not on the agenda. We can do an update. Yeah, I have information on that, but it's not on this agenda.
Okay, legal fees, prior years, the budgeted $60,000 a month or annual budget, actual is 22,000. I know we've spent a lot under the PSA for legal expenses, so our total between the professional service agreement and our general fund ends up being about that $60,000. However, that was non-PSA related. I'd like to, in those opportunities, we can use those PSA agreements. Let's try and do that best we can. Because I think a lot of the legal that we're going to encounter are with those type of agreements. However, the rate that we have with Sanchez and Wilson is actually very reasonable. Mayor expense dropped from $1,000 to $500. Materials and supplies at $2,400. We didn't have anything budgeted. I envision this being things like weed whacker screen.
It's not in public works. I think we should put public works together to track that better.
With
If
fuel.
you pull it out and what we are, it should be in the whole section.
Okay. Look at that. Okay. Memberships and dues, subscription $650, in line with prior years. Miscellaneous city, quit $0. We're gonna have something, but we really shouldn't. We should be able to.
We should be able to track that.
Yes. Exactly. Newspaper publishing, put 500. Previously spent $80 prior. Our amended budget's at 1,500. I know we're gonna be publishing notices. This also should be tied to the fees that we're charging under our fee schedule for those items that require public notice. However, that doesn't directly link.
We're gonna have to publish a lot of that. We did.
So that we're I think that was one item I'm talking about after the commissioners court meeting. So with it being one contract through them, they can do their own things. However, if we need to amend this, I think we're gonna have to amend our budget at some point. We can look at those little things. So same with postage and delivery. Now we've been trying to go to our text service. So we're trying to avoid the cost of having to flush out the newsletters. We'd like that to be digital. We'd like it to be an email newsletter. We'd like it to be a text service newsletter. We can have it available here for pickup. We can have it available at the post office for pickup. We want to heavily be involved in the newsletter, communicating with the citizens. However, that's an opportunity I think to reduce costs. Payroll tax and salaries. I'd like to carve that out for a moment. Let's get through all of our expenses. I feel like the salaries is going to be a separate conversation entirely. So I'm skipping over the payroll tax and salaries. Really, the payroll tax and the salaries and wages, those two things go hand in hand. I came up with mine as a proportionate cost based on our actuals of prior years to project the payroll tax. All right, service fee for the city. So prior years, $25,000 budget, actual 15. Put it for 20. I understand that's not as important. General maintenance. I'm sorry.
The copy machines.
I'm sorry.
Copy machines.
Yeah. Office supplies, $6,000. Something reduced from $15,000. Something also reflected in our materials and supplies. I'd like to get very tight on what exactly we need and reduce the need for as much office supplies. I know we got a very big closet packed with all kinds of things. I think we can trim this. Training, $1,000 in line with the prior year's budget. Multi-center operations / utilities. So in prior years budgeted budgets, there hasn't been an allocation for utilities. I know in the prior year there's $35,000 for the multi-center operations. Really, my understanding is that's items revolving the blue building.
That's all the buildings.
That's all the buildings.
Utilities.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
Okay. So in line. Animal Defense League, Animal Control. So we're not using the Animal Defense League anymore per se, but we have had an amount budgeted in the past that hasn't been utilized. I know prior years they had a figure. That's one initiative that I would like us to consider a high priority. We recently approved the pet ordinance to be considered by our attorney. The intent with this line item is to afford, to compensate for the time from the time that the police department apprehends an animal, and it has to go through a period of being held. There's the Bear County's facility that might be available to us in the near future. That's still a ways out. Using these different organizations and having relationships where we can actually afford to pay for that animal to be housed to allow us to have resources to attack the compliance with our pet ordinances and stray animals.
So, this should strictly, or this should, be used to pay for the fees, right?
Yes.
Like the fees to take the dog in, or, well, now it's gonna be the cents on the donation side. What other fees or what other expenditures are in there using that line item for?
I mean, primarily, it really just depends what ends up happening on the back end of that, right? So they hold them for that 72-hour period, and then depending what happens after that, I mean, there could be further additional costs.
Those, like when we had our agreement with, Animal Defense League, they were charging $225 because that $225 was to see the animal through all the way from intake to adoption. The San Antonio Humane Society, I believe it's $35.
Yeah, depending who the resource that we're leaning on, it's gonna have enough fees.
Would we be looking at this to use it for, training or equipment or anything like that? No? Okay. That I guess-
However, I think through sponsorships and donations, we can get the supplies that we talked about regarding the shipping, like reader, but we can get a donation.
Well, because my intent was to just use one of my line items to buy everything.
Yeah, that's perfect. This is primarily for that intermediary period from when you apprehend an animal until its ultimate like back in downstream of what happens to it.
That-
Not sure if it's enough, but I think $20,000 could make a pretty big impact on our stray animal situation.
I think that's.
and it's something that can be looked at on a regular basis. It's gonna have to do with stray dogs. So as the stray dogs are coming in, we're gonna have the officers trained, we're gonna have the resources available to apprehend that animal and ensure that it's taken care of on next steps. The next line item is TMRS. So that's the,
That's a retirement.
it's the retirement fund, Texas Municipal League Retirement Center System. So prior year's budget, this budget does not include any contribution. However, we have actually spent $36,000 unbudgeted. I understand that this is something that was approved back in December. However, it needs to be budgeted. So that's something we can look at, but as a budget, the budget to balance, if it's something that's going there, it needs to come from somewhere else. But we can get back to that with the salaries conversation. But for now, that's our administrative expenses. Are there any questions or comments amongst the board regarding these administrative items? All right, our municipal court. So we have our state court costs and fines. Prior year budgeted 200,000, actual 165. However, our actual is a bit skewed because there's a period we won't have in court. Here it's 185,000. The technology and building fund 10,000, in line with prior years. Contract labor 0 prior years. Have been far exceeding that than what was budgeted. We can't let that happen again. We can maintain our budget. Membership dues and subscriptions $1,000. Prior year was $574. Office supplies court $5,000. Prior year $7,000. Also something I think we can reduce. As I was counting this up, just between the administrative and municipal, last year we're spending over $20,000 on office supplies. I see that as an obvious area that we can reduce our costs. Our municipal judge is $6,000 budgeted. Prior year was $5,000. Actually, $500. I've heard in some instances we can find judges that may not necessarily need a rate of compensation. They might do it for their hours or their experience or the title. I think that's something worth pursuing, but as it is now, we are paying our municipal prosecutor in line with prior year's budgets. Service fees $5,000. Prior year's budget is $8,000, but we actually only spent $1,000. Municipal court $3,000. Prior year was $6,000 budget. We spent 0. So you know what it is. Training for the court $1,300 versus prior year's $1,000. We haven't spent any. And then warrant expenses is 0. That's due to hiring a legal collections company, and it gets paid from what they collect. That's it for municipal court. Moving on to the police department. So, Chief, have you had a chance to look these over in the proposed budget? I know you have your handout that you gave us with your requests. Right. These match. So this budget matches the requests, with the exception of the $2,000 emergency management, which I moved from an administrative item to a police department. Do you want to take us through what you need?
Well, the supplies, this is basically it covers the necessities that we need, folders and paper, bigger than folder is big.
Sorry to cut you off. So in the budget I have it as miscellaneous. You want me to actually make it supplies?
No, I think that's the point. This is not our office supplies.
Okay, well then that's a difference. So I put 5,000.
You have to go in the order of what you have done. So the membership dues and subscriptions, I just heard what it was from the year before. The actual expenses are what it reflects there, 678. That's because it pays for, my membership to the Alamo Area Chiefs Association, and then the game club. I wasn't aware that it was $600, but that came from ACOG, so that's where it was 768. I do plan on being a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and PERP, which is a research forum for chiefs. So I need to see what kind of expenses that's gonna come out to, which is why I said that I can find out. There are professional seminars and stuff like that that I'm waiting to attend.
So you're actually gonna utilize it this year?
Yes. Then, under the miscellaneous, I requested to reduce that to 7,000 because it allowed me to shift over money into the service fees, which is where I actually needed. So now that I'm mentioning the service fees, I'm requesting that 31,000 because it's gonna pay for the WatchGuard campus system. The cloud-based evidence library that we have, is going to pay for the new policy system that we're under now. And it's going to pay for the grants service that I'm requesting, that we can maximize the grants. It's going to pay for Leads Online, which is a program used to recover stolen items. That's so that we can come back with that problem. So I think it gives me a wiggle room of $1,000 to $2,000, but that's what it is.
It's also the Cradle Point and
Cradle Points, Brazos, everything we use for operate as we speak right now.
RMS.
The training is paramount. We want to have officers out in the community that are professional in every aspect possible, and we need to invest in their training, because that's basically what's going to reflect out there in the community. So that one, that also is for my training, chief training that I have to go through every day. I do plan on sending our detectives to detective school, our lieutenant to administrative school. So I'm going to utilize it as the biggest potential that I can on that line item on training. Vehicle maintenance, it's basically tires and oil changes on anything that breaks, which anything that breaks, it would be stuff that's outside of warranty coverage. Vehicles are on lease. That minimizes our expenditures on getting vehicles back on the road if they're on warranty. So that would cover basically for tires, you build tires at a high rate because of 35 and nails, and screws, and all kinds of things on the road. Community policing, it's at 2,000. So right now, what everything that's not to do is make a request to lower my vehicle maintenance and add it on to the community policing. When you take 2,000 out of the vehicles and put it in community policing.
So it'd have to be something we have a motion with the next meeting, but I'll make a note of that. I'm gonna try and have that.
Okay.
2,000 from.
2,000 from vehicle maintenance and put it in the community policing. Now I have 4,000.
Why do you need that if it's gonna be much?
Because I want to do more events. I know we have the potential to do a lot of stuff. Utilities was a line item that was not there before, that the city administrator, I asked for that to be there, so that way, like, internet, phone system, trainers, all that is more controlled. In the past, out of the lines of those extensions, I didn't know it was coming in now, so that will allow me to keep track of it, down to the penny. And what emergency management, you said you added that.
Okay, so, of your $79,000 annual amended budget from last year, you spent $39,000 so far.
We got 200 already for it.
There you go, tight. So, now you have 85,000 for next year.
I'll probably use 40.
If that's the case, you might need all right, all in all, it gives us totals are still on our general fund. Total expenses of $1,057,088, which matches our revenue sources. So the item that we did skip over were their salaries. So looping back to salaries, let's have that conversation. Our prior year, and with the payroll tax being a function of the salaries, let's really just focus on the salaries, and then we can back in the payroll number. How I have it proposed, $372,840. That allows for a $22,000 increase over the prior year's budgeted amount. However, we're already over that for the year. We need to look at this. I think we've made various different commitments as far as our personnel and employees go that we can't necessarily afford with our budget. If we want to make any changes compared to this 372 number, it needs to balance. So if we want to move things from another line item to the salaries, it's something we can consider. But this 372 includes our police department. So this 372 is comprised of our city clerk, general clerk, chief of police, full-time officers, part-time police officers, public works supervisor, and public works technician. Those are the positions that we've had under our prior years. We want to amend that.
The public works technician.
So that's why we have this. So let's look at that. Well, he's just not there. Yeah, so this is a new position. And I think, to me, a public works tech, similar to that in my role, maintenance manager, where we have our lead or skilled person who's really the lead in public works, and then we have a helper. And to me, the $13 an hour for a helper position is more than fair. Yeah, I would have thought that.
There's no problem.
Correct. There's no court clerk as a function of the city. In the past, we've maintained our personnel differently. My budget is more reflective of the prior year's budget as far as salaries and personnel goes. If we want to make changes, again, we've got to make room for those changes, and it's something the prior board didn't do. And now we're having to be faced with some hard decisions. I know the city administrator has proposed several different options for various different personnel. Would you like to take us through that, Valerie? Your proposal?
Yeah, the one on top, that's the current. And those are all positions that have been, aside from me, that have been with the city. So like, for instance, the She was not in a position, she's been here. There- So, she's come down, that's not a position, she's been here.
Okay. So this budget balances with $372,840 from salaries. Each of these have a pretty significant difference. Option one is a difference of $122,000. Option two has $96,000 difference. Option three is $88,000. Option four is $77,000 difference. I feel like we're already stretching. There's items that we need to add to our general fund that we're not paying. We're paying with capital improvement funds. So I don't know how we afford to pay much more. Yes.
Like, city manager, police officers.
The wage freeze. The wage freeze.
So what is that?
Wage freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's still a difference of $77,384. Where would that come from? We have a workshop. There'll be an opportunity to speak at the end. Give me 1 second. We'll get through the general fund, and then we can open up for questions. But if you're proposing an option four, and again, this is just a conversation, it wouldn't be until the 28th that we can actually do this, but yeah. Where would it come from? Would it come from the police department? Come from engineering? Legal fees? We've got to take it from somewhere.
We talk about it. Yeah.
Well, that's the point of our workshop. So we're discussing.
I feel. We need to. I will ask a question.
Yeah, that's right. We can't be in a deficit. That's right.
I would suggest it's an option.
Excuse us.
Over 65. You're gonna need some money, right?
We don't have enough to afford it.
I know. So if you do that, you can generate probably 109,000. Take the keep them, let the house, there's no room.
Yeah, right.
You have to do something.
It brings up a good point, something to discuss. What do you think of the tax rate?
No, it's just fine.
Right. This is a workshop, this is where we're discussing.
It's a workshop.
Yeah.
If it's take a look at it.
Right. Right.
We need to discuss it now.
Well, so what do you think of the tax rate though? I mean, we're off 77,000 and Commissioner Guzman's proposed that we cover that difference with the tax rate. It's a conversation we've never had as a board. The conversation we had previously, I was told different things. But now we're at the point where we've got to make our decisions.
Yes, that our thing is, if we don't get that, we're gonna have to sue it. We need to pay back $3 million, all right?
That's a great, no.
But we still have to pay.
Right, we do, and we have our $750 50 some odd thousand of our capital improvement fund, and we also have resources we can lean on. If we pass a tax now, then that's not money we can use for a bonding capacity. That's money that's gonna take in salaries.
No, that's a workshop.
Right.
We gotta speak about it. Huh?
Right.
I don't want to tax. We need it. What you think?
Oh, I disagree. I don't think we need a tax.
Then you better dig up some money somewhere.
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay.
I don't think it's there.
Yeah, we have to. What do you think of the tax?
I'm really,
You're not in favor of the tax rate?
Because, well, you know, I usually don't like tax. I don't agree. That's the way it is.
because what I see is when Exxon or Oakville, they pay 8.25, correct?
And then we get 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is much the way, I don't get it.
And it's down from prior years. But I think the overarching plan, in my understanding of on Army's been to invest in economic development, trying to bring businesses, maintaining a very low tax rate or no tax rate to incentivize that investment, which would then create values and revenues. It'd be one thing if there's a tax rate in the future based off billions of dollars in value, but we're not there yet.
No, we're not there yet.
We're 1/10 of that, about $100 million.
When you bring in that company there, they haven't shown me nothing. I don't think they'll pay any taxes. But we need money now, so we can get it. I found nothing to look at. I look at it, I'm like, my house, right?
I agree.
Or dollar store,
Love
takes money.
it. Not necessarily, it takes their money.
Yeah, but you can't depend on that, we have a time trying to get people to come over here.
Once we have our sewer, our pathway to sewer, everything will
If
change.
we're looking at probably 5 years from
Hopefully less, but yeah, 3 to 5 years, a lot of work to get there. So we need to be able to live with what we have
now, yeah, but
until we have the sewer.
we gotta look forward.
I agree, but I want to remain conservative, and I don't want to tax.
What you're gonna look at too is, I talked about the sewer, and we went spoke it there, and, you know, you're looking at 2026, it's not gonna be next year, or 2 years from now. Could be good, could be 10 years, we're gonna have a meeting with engineers here next week, something like that. And we're just starting, we're engineering, that's our take upon the $3 million that we got.
Right.
And we'll apply.
We don't want to tax the pay, $8,000
I'll recognize you, we'll have a moment once we're done with this.
Thank you.
Please.
Well, that's not that because if everybody thinks it's gonna be that, like I said, it's next year, and they gave us a date of 2026, like a completion date. That's what, we'll be able to get some big box stores and stuff like that. And, we just don't have yet. So, and they did run out there in order to, now, years from now, we'll get some bigger stuff and stuff like that. People are gonna have to think about a tax because if you borrow a lot of money, you gotta have something to back it up. And the planners have told us what backs it up is added over tax. We don't need it right now.
Right.
We're not planning.
I'm just putting it out there,
It's a discussion,
it's just a
It's a
discussion.
discussion, that's right.
Whatever we.
and we still can talk about it at 2028.
That's when there's action.
That's when
It's something that we're gonna have to look forward, not for tomorrow, but 5 to 10 years. Probably won't be here to see the storage, maybe 3
I'm
years.
gonna be here. Come on.
But we gotta look, it's not for me, it's for all of us. I know 50% of the people, or maybe more, set the tax. If we look at it, they won't be able to afford to pay $100, $200 for lights, okay? But we still need a storage for business, correct?
Correct. Not for employees.
We're not there yet. It's just not there.
We're not there yet, we don't need it yet either.
Absolutely.
So we have, as it is now, it's a $14 million project. We have $6 million in grants. We have a $700,000 match that we have to come up with. Not this physical year, next physical year. And then we still have $8 million to come up with too.
We can't look back, I'm not even, he's a, whatever.
But it was conservative, and in that operational sense, in the years prior, is what we need to bring things from A to B. B is 2-3 years
I
out.
don't want to wait here. Good for all of us. Business is good. A good example is, 10 years ago, Lyman didn't have nothing. They had a paper shop, building. Now, they got an IHOP, they got doctor, they got
Because they have no
sources.
They have their own sewer, they have their own water, they have their own trash.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
People might not agree with me, but
I agree. That's why I think it's great to look at ideas like a water company, a sewer company, that forms of revenue that could catapult us to it.
I don't want to see one Army as the old Highway 81. Just driven through there,
Yes,
it's a cemetery for junk cars.
yeah,
Agreed. I
agreed.
don't want that here. If I'm still here, you can log me out. I don't want a piece of that stuff.
Agreed. So we have our ordinances in place to,
That's
we need to enforce it.
ordinance.
So that's the way I feel. Whatever the hell happens.
Agreed. Anybody like to provide any comment? Let's go.
Raymond, you're talking all the good talk right now, but you're not listening to your people that voted you or might vote you in again. No, I'm talking now, okay? Sorry,
Just
sir.
be respectful of the board.
I am
Respectful.
being respectful, I am. You're not listening. You're not listening to anything that we are talking about or we are asking you to do. I don't understand it. We don't have the money. We do not, no, we don't. We don't have the money to have an $80,000 administrator that treats us like shit. I'm sorry, crap, I'm sorry. And
She didn't want her friends to know.
I don't understand when you're trying to look for money, sir, that we don't have. We don't have that money. And you're still looking and looking and looking and wanting to give us a tax so we can keep somebody like that. You understand, sir? I don't mean to be, I'm sorry that I'm rude to you. I am so sorry.
That's a
Jody, he can respond.
You didn't hear what the statement I made, did you?
No, I can't hear you, no.
Well, the statement was that we keep the same pay for the city manager and police department.
We don't need a city manager, get it? We don't need it. We don't need a city administrator, sir.
I don't think that process is about.
It's the money, that's what it's about.
Yeah, well, we're discussing it.
Well, let's let it.
I must have it wrong, yes.
Thank you.
But we're talking about the budget, her salary is in the budget.
That's correct.
So it is correct that she's talking about her salary.
Why do you want to shut me up, sir?
Are you-
Why?
You said your piece. Would you have more to add?
I don't understand, I don't think that he understands. He's trying to pass a tax to pay her salary. That's all you're doing. Because if you pay, you're trying to look for money to pay her salary, that's all you're talking about. How is that?
We haven't passed anything, man.
No, I know you haven't passed it, but you're talking about the budget. And the budget, we're talking about salaries right now, and you're looking for, well, we gotta take it out somewhere because we're gonna keep her salary.
We gotta keep her, don't be, the only thing I'm talking
We
about.
can't afford her.
Is the city, I'm talking about the city. We need what we have right now.
No, we don't, no, we don't.
Right, so this is an argument, this discussion, we thank you for your words, we appreciate your participation. Anybody else like to say anything?
I have a question maybe, and then a question for you as well.
Okay.
I'm not for sure where you're coming from, and I hear what you're saying to the ladies as well. But I guess what, for me to understand what you're coming from is if you could say the salary that you're proposing, or this salary is going to be, A is going to be for the mayor, or B is gonna be for the commissioner, C is going to be for the city administrator, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if you put that out there and made it clear, because I like to have it written down. That would make everybody understand, because also the comment you're making is, I'm here for the city of Von Army, but we here as the city of Von Army are not being seen and not being heard. And that's my point. And so if I could get that from you, A, we're going to pay this, and B, we're going to pay that, I think it would be more clear for everybody.
Come back in 28.
So that would be public on the 28th. So at this stage, we're just
Okay.
kind of talking.
Okay.
We have our total
Can you
amount.
come prepared with that? I would be awesome if you can come prepared, because the city of Von Army wants to be seen.
Okay, there's more than 20 others in one area.
Right, but the people that were here last time didn't get that information, and we would really love it. And as a citizen, I would love to have that, especially backing what you're saying. That's just what I'm saying.
But look around, how many people are here for one area?
Yes,
How many?
Well, because we almost died of heat stroke the last time.
and,
1,300 of them.
yeah, but that's not, makes, you're one person. You're one person.
You think that's funny?
We're
All
1,300.
right, we're gonna maintain order.
The other thing that
I want to clarify one item. You
Sure.
did say you were referencing the commissioners. The commissioners and the mayors not paid positions.
I know.
We're not paid or.
Correct. And I understood
Just wanted to
that.
clarify that.
Yeah.
For the record.
Oh, no, I knew that, but I just wanted to have it as an example. The other thing that I wanted to ask you is about, in the previous years for the budget for salaries and stuff, from my understanding, I spoke to you when we were outside about there was pay that was being paid that was outrageous. In other words, for PTO. From my awareness, people get paid to go to whatever they wanted to go. From the government side, which, you know, you can look it up, it's usually around 9 to 11 days of holiday. Is that been incorporated into your budget to where they're going to only be taking off so many days and not all of these outrageous days that they want
Yes.
to take off?
So maybe you can bring that up. My good, they're hourly positions, so maybe a
Yes.
salary position would have PTO, not hourly employee, most of the largest.
That's what they adopted. They did 3.7 hours PTO per work period. That's what the city adopted.
That's what the
I
in
didn't-
this budget,
what you
so
said?
is that the city adopted prior years, they get 3 point,
Every pay period to get 3.7 hours of PTO.
Is that like weekly or monthly or
Bi-weekly.
bi-weekly? So they would get 6 over 7 hours of PTO every month.
You still have that?
no,
So that's a lot.
That's the only benefit that they've had, that there's no health insurance, they got retirement in December.
This is true. However, if I want to go to Fiesta, I should be taking that time off on my own, and the city of Army should be paying for that. You know, things like that is like, if I want to do that, I gotta take off.
Right, but it's for sick time, for vacation, it's all in one, there's not individual criteria.
So it's all in one
It's
budget.
just one, they don't get the individual.
is that the first level?
The city.
Is it a resolution? Then you look. Everybody else, Art?
We have something really unique in Von Army, something that most Texans don't have, and that is no property tax, right? And a constant theme you hear from our friends in San Antonio, name the city, is how taxes are out of control, appraisals are out of control. I've been at the appraisal district, I think, every week in the last 6 weeks. I did one today. And that's very valuable. I just want you to think about it. We worked so hard to achieve it. And Sandy was there every week when we did it, right? We did it together. It required us to think very different than other cities, right? We had to be frugal. We had to be innovative. We had to save our pennies and buy things instead of borrowing. We did a lot of things to achieve that. And so don't be so quick to give it away. And it's one of those slippery zones. I think that's what you see. You see all the signs around the town, You see all the people coming to meetings, and frankly, you know, it's a school night. People got to go to work tomorrow. So I haven't heard one resident say that they want to raise taxes. Not one. People that I was shocked. Look at this room. People here that 5, 6 years ago were fighting each other are all united. We're all here with one voice to say, do what you have, right? You can do it. It's not, might not be the easiest way to do it, right? You may have to, like the mayor said, well, let's pull something from here or make a sacrifice over there. It can be done. You can balance this budget without taxing this. And this year, we all know that there's a recession looming, right? When we started eliminating taxes, it was in the middle of the recession. I remember the first year we did it, every other taxing jurisdiction, Bear County and the surrounding counties, raised taxes. We were the only ones to lower it. And the reason why we lowered it was everyone on the council agreed that if our residents are hurting financially, then we should deal with less. We should give some of that back, right? Because every dollar we take, we're not a wealthy community, right? So this isn't, you know, Fair Oaks Ranch where, you know, you raise taxes $500 and oh well, you know. This money comes out of people's weekly, monthly budget. It's coming out of their food budgets. It's coming out of their gas budgets. You know, we've got a lot of residents that live, you know, in the mobile home parks as well. I mean, they're not going to come to land, you know, but they pay taxes on their homes, right? And so it's a big deal to bring these taxes back, right? And a lot of people, like I said, that's something they're very proud of, and I think we can accomplish this, especially this year's budget, you know, can certainly be balanced with what we have. And with and so I ask you to consider that. I ask you to rise up to the challenge and find the money if you can, or do without if you can, or be frugal. That's what the people are asking for, right? And I know there's a lot of words and everything going around, but we won't want a property tax. We worked so hard to achieve this, and we need to preserve it. It's one of the things that makes it special. It's one of the main reasons why people want to bring their businesses to our town, right? When we talked to the pilot, we did that big project. It's totally transformed our city's finances. The main reason they said that they came here was the no property taxes. And at the time, we had no fees because we can't compete with San Antonio, right? San Antonio will give them free utilities, free sewer lines, free water, free electricity, because they own all the utility companies, right? And they can compete. All we had was low taxes and low fees and expedited process. I think that's one of the reasons why the mayor, and I agree with him, said we need to start our own utility companies, right? We have the ability to provide sewer. We have the ability to extend water lines. One, we can work with those developers and compete with them. That should be a long-term goal. But if we give away our low or no property tax, we don't have any competitive advantage. That's what's going to bring folks here. That's what Alamo River said. They sent a letter in saying, "Oh my God, we came to Ormy because it was, you know, cost efficient, and they invested over $1 million and that brings in sales tax revenue, right?" So I agree with you. If a business is going to come in here and not bring any sales tax, maybe it doesn't fit on our city plan. What I ask you is to kind of be faithful to that last 15 years. All of us that work for it, everybody who's been on the council, all the residents, everyone who's come collectively came together and accomplished for us something that I think only 3 other cities in Texas have ever done. Honor that. Please honor that. And I think this year, there's no need for a property tax. And there's nothing that's being proposed that's going to benefit everybody to that sense of harm, right? So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I think we can do this without a property tax.
Thank you, Art. Anybody else like to add anything? Anybody here?
I do have one more thing. And I do think that because of the process that's been posted, that there's going to be some significant legal challenges and obstacles. So I think the process for bringing back property tax has been properly followed.
Thank you, Art. Anything else to add up here before we move on? Okay, so
What's the probability of the minimum wage work not getting
So in the proposed budget over here, 372,840, that includes the requested raise, it's actually significant raise for the existing positions, 350 to 372. None of these options that have been presented and prepared by the city administrator include that.
I does.
Which one? Option one. Oh, that's not what you proposed.
Oh, I'm not worried about me, I'm worried about my office.
Okay, then yes, option one would not include yourself, but would include us. And that's a difference of 122,000.
Option one. Will it be at 21?
But, so that's the big question, is where we're gonna take to afford any of these options? Where's it gonna come from? So Chief, you had mentioned, your prior year, you didn't spend all of your $79,000 budgeted. That might be something, but otherwise, we've got to make sacrifices elsewhere to be able to afford any of these.
You gotta do it like 48.
That's okay. And if we need to have another budget workshop to discuss it, we can. I would encourage that to avoid any surprises. Ms. Mann.
Casey, the previous budget did not include the city administrator on it. I
Correct.
mean, that's the struggle you're having now, is having to pay for a city administrator out of.
Correct. And it was not amended since then.
So we have, she came on, she was brought on for an unbudgeted position.
Correct. It's never been budgeted, so our actual expenses are 402,000.
Yeah.
Our budget was 350. So that's a discrepancy. That's the position we're in, and that was the prior board didn't do us any favors, because that's why we're in this position. So we have a budget, we don't have a choice, we need to have a balanced budget, and we have obligations that exceed our budget that we're starting with. So that's where it comes in to make the hard choices. Let's go.
I feel in my opinion, that a lot of the residents agree that, if it wasn't there before, and we can go without it, commissioners, it's a given to go with the mayor's budget and vote no property taxes. It's my opinion.
Thank you. All right, yes.
Then with that, if that is, we need to keep our police department, with their raises, because that's gonna lift the morale and to keep the officers. And don't pass yours up, you still need to have your raise. I know, because I did the same thing. I had my staff get the raise and I didn't take one. But you need to take your portion as well. And all of the officers need to have their raises. So if we eliminate this big chunk of the budget, that's gonna free up the income for our officers.
So the proposed budget, they do have their raises.
We need to have them.
Okay, so her salary was not budgeted, the city administrator, but we have a petition of 186 resident citizens.
It's gonna be considered on Thursday. Response to that.
Well, I hope
Yes, sir.
the commissioners are aware of that. About
What
the
did you say?
petition.
I didn't hear what you said, I'm sorry.
That's gonna be, so there's an item on the agenda for Thursday,
Okay,
it's in response to petition 5.
okay.
Just-
Okay, I'm not a resident here, I'm not a general
Right, ma'am.
public.
Yeah.
So just to say that, for considering the salaries, benefit would be to have a city administrator or a city clerk. Because of the level of responsibilities that the city administrator does, and the city clerk position prior to that I was in was not fulfilling all those duties. And so that's just what I'm saying, if you're looking for the net income, I would say go with the city clerk.
Anybody else?
That's your job?
Cody? This is the last one, we're gonna move on, we still got four more funds.
Mayor, we didn't have a city clerk before, and she did everything. Yes, she did, and for you, you're rude and ugly, that's what you are.
Please
And
maintain
you don't need to
respect.
be here either.
Mrs. Jody, please maintain respect.
Well, she doesn't need to disrespect me either.
Right.
Thank you.
Order, maintain order.
She getting paid right now?
Thank you. You grabbed me. I don't need to hear it.
All right, going to the capital improvement fund.
It's not you.
So I would suggest we carry out this conversation prior to the 28th. All right, moving on to our capital improvement fund. So revenue sources, we have our CD grant, we have a sewer grant. Then I'd like to propose a sponsorship, some kind of fundraising activity. Spoke with several local businesses. They've expressed interest in like a monument sign. Something says like "Welcome to Ormy." We got the information from TxDOT on how to get permission to do that in their easements. Somerset has a cool sign. Vital has a cool sign. We've looked at options. And I put a line item for a sponsorship. Maybe we have like a little placard on the back of the sign of all the businesses. We did that. We said about it. Okay, we'll double check here. Maybe they don't get the name on it. She was saying that we may not be able to do that with the have advertisements included with the TxDOT sign. Something we can look into. Either way, I think regardless of having the names on it, there's businesses that would like that first. So that kind of goes in hand with our expenses. So again, I'm going to point out there's non-annual items that are included. So that would be the audit on prior years. We're several years behind on our audits. We need one per year. This allows us to get 2 years caught up. So we have one for our prior fiscal year, it would be the general expense for FY 22 to 23, and then this would allow for us to go back another year, 21 to 22.
Well, 19 to 20, we're already doing 21 to 22. We're doing that now.
Okay, 19 to 20. And then this for 22. Building improvements, 16,000. So that was a contract that was previously bid, the board approved on the 25th of August. Park improvements, the $50,000 kind of goes hand in hand with the grants that we received for park improvements, things like the solar lights and the shade coverings we looked at. Vehicles and equipment, and so that's something I would consider that should be a general expense, more of an operating account, a normal expense that should be included with our general fund in future years. However, this year we can't afford it, so I have to list the capital improvement. I would also say the tax note series, I would also consider that an operating item. That's an annual deal.
So originally they were using the economic development fund for that, but when they closed it, they transferred it to capital improvement. I think that's why it comes out of that.
Okay. Let's look at that. But for right now, it's included in capital improvement fund. It's more from us. Okay, several items that there's some grants in here. There's some AC maintenance that have occurred and was budgeted. Hopefully that's taken care of. Put on here the $15,000 welcome sign that correlates to the sponsorship for monuments. The $3 million planning acquisition and design for the sewer goes hand in hand with the revenue source of the grant. Then in here we have a $35,000 line item for our city planner. Something we've worked with Brandon Mellon with Mellon City. He is a one-man shop, fairly flexible, where we can budget out our time with him, but there's a few things that we would consider priorities, things like our master thoroughfare plan, something that we have meetings with our AA and PO and some of the local groups to try and piggyback on some of their grant studies and funding, so that any kind of roadway improvements we want included with their master thoroughfare plan for Bear County is something we try and piggyback off of them. There's several improvements that we can do to our planning that we'd like to start chipping away with. And so I've included a $35,000 budget from our capital improvement fund to be working on. Something we recently started with it was the plating ordinance, which I know we're still working on. But this would incorporate a master plan update master thoroughfare. Really is the first and primary of master thoroughfare studies. But that accounts for instances. So our beginning balance is of 321,000. I'm budgeting revenues of 3,065,000 plus the carryover from the general fund, less our expenses would end us with 540,000.
I will say that we already received the CJAC grant, so the revenue, the expense has already been performed. Which means of those.
Gotcha. Where's the expense? Oh, we just incurred the
We incurred the expense, but we've also got one here.
expense. Where's the expense? Oh, here it is.
It's the
Here it is.
first line in the revenue.
Any other questions, comments on capital improvement fund? Ideally, something to consider with our investment policy is how to incorporate any large balances such as the capital improvement fund or something short term. That's not incorporated. All right, our street improvement fund is the next item. So this is our revenue is sourced from a 0.25% of our sales tax. So this is supposed to be used for street improvements. I think we have a handout here regarding the tax code, chapter 327, regarding the use of that. This is for street improvements. Revenue from tax imposed under this chapter may be only used to maintain and repair municipal streets or sidewalks existing on the date of the election to adopt the tax. So prior years had budgeted 60,000, however, didn't spend any. So you'll notice the
It should be 125. Based on that $500,000 in tax, we should be depositing 125.
basic. Okay, we'll double check that. But prior years was 60,000, so that equals for this year. We're gonna do the math to make sure it's really the 60,000 plus the revenues from the general fund that should equal a 2%. So 0.25% here, 1 3/4 in the general fund, it should all equal that. So prior years we didn't spend anything on roads, so that gives us a surplus for this year. So I included our expenses. We have our street lighting in line with the amended budget from last year. Not sure why there's the actual zero, but then we've got our street.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
If it's not maintenance, so it's okay, it's not street maintenance.
But this needs to go to the general fund. Okay. Street improvements at $95,000. Street signs at $5,000. I was thinking something like what we've discussed before, some signage to help people get to City Hall for court days, help to go to find City Hall, help to find the police department. I also think it'd be really cool if we had something that could have announcements of sorts, or just something we can put on a board, maybe those old school like letters that fit in, and you make a little message. Something of that sort, a window and an arrow pointing, down here.
Can we get a signage put on the access road warning trucks that basically can't use the that would eliminate them actually turning onto the city, by the time they know it, they come up on a little sign that's there. By that time, they don't care.
So I've got $5,000 for signage. This should help this year. We want to have a certain project, maybe we can have sponsorship or something about that. So all in all, that gives us $120,000 in expenses. Current revenues is $60,000, but that's using the prior year that wasn't spent of $60,000 for a total of $120,000. Any questions, comments on our street? Anybody here? Martinez.
just something to think about long term. When we started the city, we couldn't use all 2 cents in the general fund, so we created these special funds, economic development, community development, student maintenance. Now we can have all 2 cents as a general fund. And really the only difference, we collect the same amount of money, but it wouldn't just be restricted. Every 4 years, we have to renew the street maintenance fund, or we'll lose it to the EFD. And so, I know we tried to do it a couple of years ago, and I think the attorney just didn't get it done quick enough. But at some point, you can put it on the ballot to ask the residents, should we convert the street maintenance tax with its limited expense use and roll it into the general fund, so we just have a 2 cent general fund.
I believe it's next year.
So you may want to make sure you budget for an election, or to free that money up so that next year, the $60,000 could be used for general fund items up to, and obviously you still need to budget for street maintenance, and that's saying use it all. But that way, we don't have, we're always having to remember this 4-year cycle, and it costs us an election every 4 years. Just throwing that out there, because if you want to do it this year, you need to budget for that election in May. Even the next 2 dates, if you want to do that. Thank you. And if it's up for renewal anyway, then we have to budget for election.
Okay. Going on, any other comments that, going on to the PSA fund. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. So it appears we do have a reconciliation. It's gonna be number 3. Right? This all is one of
No, the only thing that goes, former city clerk was advised she could spend it out of the general fund and be reimbursed.
So that's where his reconciled. So then on the next version, this will just be updated to reflect that. This is what we need to do. Any comments, questions? All right, from here, the asset forfeitures, not too much action, so my understanding it's kind of hit or miss for revenue sources. So of the 20,000 that's available in that account, we had 20,000 for police department expenses. Anything else to add?
That's gonna be used for, the outfit or equipment with, rifles. They've never had rifles, so for rifles, in light of Uvalde's shooting, I want to get the department shields for in case we ever have to respond to Somerset or Southwest ISD, schools. Or, I mean, they can really be used for any active shooter situation.
I think you got shields with tasers.
No, that was just statement. But no, it's, we need to stop thinking that things like that don't happen in Barney. They can happen anywhere, and I'd rather be prepared for it. So, and that account will be used basically all for equipment, first aid stuff, that kind of thing.
Another question, if you're using all those, do you need as much? Maybe something to think about between now and 28. If you have the 20,000 from asset forfeitures, do you need to go 85, whatever?
I want to go back to the wish list for the department, but I want to say we're like, I start ordering all the different things. I'll get on that, see if there's anything that I can not satisfy but make people love.
Is there any other items?
We have
or-
the first training.
Which one?
not even up in there.
The youth one? Oh. That's a training one. So every October, we, the department gets to send a request to the state comptroller. And they pay a certain rate for full-time officers. It's about like $500 to $600.
$668 last year.
According to the state comptroller's rules, I have to exhaust all city funds for training before I can use those funds. And have to account for it during the hour.
So what you're telling me is you need less, city funds.
No, because then they told the numbers. $600, they don't get much, get the farm much training.
But then you said you
In
use
the
these
long
funds
run-
before you use these funds.
In the long run, I would say yes, but for now, in the short term, there's really only $200 in that account. Maybe in 10 years, if there's a couple thousand in there.
All right, any other comments, questions? So we have several items that we'll be taking into the 28th, meeting on the 28th, to incorporate. So, we need to think about its difference and where that's going to come from. All right, anything else? Anybody else?
When will we know when hopefully they don't, but when will we know whether the vote was either way?
Good question. So our next step with the budget, again, this is a breathing, living document. So from here, we're gonna have our public hearing on the 28th. So that's our opportunity to find a middle ground, have a balanced budget, get it passed, and that's when you would know. If we are unsuccessful though that night, then we would divert to the prior year's budget. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully we can come to a middle ground.
It has to be done on that.
Yeah. Otherwise,
You're not gonna have another workshop, being say, maybe I'll do another one before.
yeah, I do think that's a good idea to have another one, because I think we've identified items that we need to consider. Perhaps having another one same time next Monday, a few days before the meeting on the Thursday. Now we've gone through the bulk of the materials. I think we know our fine items to discuss. I would like that to avoid any surprises.
And there'll be an agenda where.
Yeah, if there's another workshop, it would be posted. It'd also be on the website.
Will it be texted to us?
So set up the texting service, and then if you sign up for our email, texting.
Will that be, you can sign up on the Army website for that?
As soon as you go to the bonarmytx.gov, the little thing pops up. You'll sign up right there. We really want to utilize that service.
And we'll receive text with the agenda and everything, or just?
I don't know.
It will tell you how to register, and I think it will tell you what the keywords to use are to get responses.
It's a new service. We want to be using it. Please give us your feedback too. It's a new service. We haven't had many people use it.
You said it? Yeah, I don't remember. No, it doesn't-
Is that meant to be used for public safety?
Yeah, that would be good to know, for instance, if they have something that they can get out to us,
Absolutely.
that would be good to have, that they have access to it.
We can send it to you, but you have to sign up voluntarily. After
Right.
you sign up, we can push it out to you.
Right, but yeah, they need, I think that they need that as well, because.
Yeah, because
I'm here so I can learn.
you're gonna have, 15, 20 people we're asking people on our end.
If you put in a complaint online, We get a response or?
Yeah, there's a lot of response to that, it's reviewed here at the office.
Well, I put in one about the tagging on the park.
Come into our office, and let's go over it. Because we want to utilize it, right, as a valuable tool.
Who does it go to?
Goes to the-
Goes to who?
The three of us.
Right.
I haven't got anything.
Oh my God. You said you put it in for tagging this one?
Right, yeah, tagging.
When you know when you did it?
Friday.
Right, this last Friday,
I saw one about dogs.
That's different.
We get some from like people that live off of Highway 16 too. I guess they go on the website and they submit it. The ones that are law enforcement related.
yeah, so we're officially done. We carry out conversations, or meetings. Our workshop is,
And the city administrator that's first.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that there was an accident over here. With all of that brush material, I know I